Hey, what's going on, Minnesota Wild fans? It's Tom from Crash the Net. And love it or hate it, it's that time of the year again to talk about the trade deadline. And this year's trade deadline is March 21st. And today we're going to be focusing on the areas of concern for the Minnesota Wild and what we could see them do at the trade deadline. But before I forget, stay tuned till the end of this video and I'm going to tell you about a very special second Iowa Wild interview coming up. You're not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned to find out who it is. And with that being said, there are two areas of concern that we're going to talk about today. The first area of concern that we're going to talk about that we could see the Minnesota Wild make a move at the trade deadline is goaltending. So you might be asking yourself, if the Wild make a move at goaltending, Tom, who do you think they're going to go after? The first name that comes to my mind, even though he's struggled this year playing for the Chicago Blackhawks, is Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury, it's been no surprise that Fleury has been one of the best goalies when it comes time for the playoffs. We're talking about a 3-time Cup winner, a Vezina Trophy winner, and over the last 4 years, he's had a .920 save percent and a .225 goals against average. So that's one name I'm throwing out there that we could see the Minnesota Wild potentially pursue as we get closer to playoffs, just to help us get through the playoffs and to get us in. Obviously, the Minnesota Wild have been looking at the center position since the beginning of the season. Everyone knows that one of the big names that the Minnesota Wild could potentially go after during the trade deadline is Claude Giroux. Now, the problem with that is the rumor has it that in order to get Claude Giroux, we're talking the Minnesota Wild are going to have to give up a first-round draft pick, a prospect, and potential draft prospects in the future. If the Wild were to pursue Claude Giroux, who exactly could we see the Minnesota Wild get rid of? There's a couple names that instantly come to mind. First off, we could see the Wild try to move Adam Beckman, which would be a bummer because Beckman has had a really great season in Iowa. Other names that they could see the move from the Iowa Wild, obviously the first name that comes to mind for me is Alexander Hovhanov. For those of you not familiar, check out my video that I did on Alexander Hovhanov. And you might be asking, why would the Wild move Alexander Hovhanov? Well, rumor has it that Hovhanov has struggled with coaches and conditioning and just overall play. This year, he has really gone back and forth between the Iowa Wild and the Iowa Heartlanders of the ECHL. And within that time, he has seen limited amount of ice time. So Hovhanov could be looking for a way out. So they could look at potentially moving Hovhanov off of the books to a different team and potentially give him a fresh new start. And what better place to do that than Philadelphia? The other name that we could see the Minnesota Wild move is possibly Pavel Novak, who has actually been doing really well this year for the Kelowna Rockets, but we could see them move them. And the other big name that has just come into the mix that we could see the Minnesota Wild move is Jack McBain. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Jack McBain, he actually plays for Boston College and actually played alongside Matthew Boldy. Now, McBain has said at the end of this year he doesn't know if he's willing to sign with the Minnesota Wild. He could test the free agent market. So that means the Minnesota Wild could potentially look at moving his rights before the end of the season to another team at the trade deadline. And he could be looking for a fresh start anywhere. Now, if Claude Giroux is not available, another name that has been thrown out in the mix is Tomas Hertl of the San Jose Sharks. At the same time, any of those players, potentially, I think Novak would be the best option if you're going to try to trade for Hertl. I can see Novak easily slide into the San Jose Sharks roster and could potentially be the guy that they're looking for. Now, other names that we could see the Minnesota Wild move. Okay, we know at the end of the season they're going to either need to sign Matt Dumba or Kevin Fiala. It's been no secret one of those two guys is going to need to be signed. That also means we could see the Minnesota Wild potentially move one of those guys before the end of the season at the trade deadline. Now, the question has been going back and forth for quite a while. Who would the Minnesota Wild move? Kevin Fiala or Matt Dumba? In my mind, and this is just my take on it, I personally think that the Minnesota Wild could get a better return on Matt Dumba. Now, that's kind of based on the fact that right now he might be the current better player for the Minnesota Wild, but we also know there have been tons of teams in the past that have been looking for a right-handed defenseman. So that means also that he could ask for more money at the end of the season. So, in my mind, the better option is to sign Fiala for less money and move Dumba. That way they can possibly get a bigger return in the end. Plus, not to keep in mind that they still have very good defensemen still in Iowa and have Ryan O'Rourke that they could look at signing, who is a defenseman, at the end of the year also. The other names we could see the Minnesota Wild potentially try to move before the end of the year are obviously Jordy Ben, Alex Goligoski. Both of those guys are unrestricted free agents at the end of the year. Both of them are defensemen, and to be honest with you, they haven't really been playing up to their full potential. Goligoski lately has been kind of stepping it up, but Ben really hasn't done much for the team. So, that's just my take. I'm sorry if there's Jordy Ben lovers on the team, but in my mind, I could see them move Jordy Ben. The other unrestricted free agents that we could see moved are Nick Bukestad. We could see Victor Rask, who's now spending time down in Iowa and has really struggled. I'm sure there's people that are looking back going, why did we ever trade Nino Niederreiter? And the other name we could see them potentially move is Kyle Rao, who's in Iowa. Rao has spent almost 4 years down in Iowa. He's one of the leaders down there for, I believe, goals scored. But we could see him getting tired of being stuck in Iowa, wanting his shot at the big club, and potentially look at moving. So those are just a few moves that we could see the Wild make. Obviously, I don't think that any of the big guys are going to be out at all, but we could see the Wild potentially maybe make some moves. At the same time, Bill Guerin has said that it has to be the right move at the right time. He's not just going to make a move to make a move. It's got to be something that betters the team. And he's got to be looking at the playoff potential. Right now, the Wild are currently sitting in third place. But the way we've been playing lately, we could either slide either way, either in or out. I don't think Guerin's going to be happy with us sitting on the bubble, barely sneaking in. He's going to want to go after Colorado and potentially get that top spot. And in order to do that, in order to take down a team like Colorado, there might be some changes that have to be made in order for us to be, as we've said all year long, one of the best, if not the best, competitive team available. You know Guerin's thinking it. You know the team to take down right now is Colorado. How can we make ourselves better to take down Colorado? With that being said, if any of those ideas, if you're not 100% on board with, that is completely okay. There's been lots of talk back and forth about what is best for the team. It's okay if you disagree with me. Leave it in the comments down below. Now, as promised, I'm going to tell you about a great interview I have coming up next week. Next week, I'm going to be interviewing Nick Swaney from the Iowa Wild. Hopefully I said his name correctly this time. I'm pretty sure I did. But we're going to be looking at interviewing Nick Swaney. So, feel free to send questions in. What do you want to know about Nick Swaney? What would you like for me to ask him? And look for that interview coming up. As always, this is Tom saying I hope you guys have a great week. We'll find out what happens on trade deadline day, March 21st. Stay tuned. I'll try to bring you updates as much as I can throughout the day. We'll see if the Wild make a big splash or if they're just going to stick with what they've got for now. As always, this is Tom saying have a great week and go Wild.